welcome back. We're going to talk about current psychoanalytic research. Last time we talked about lifespan psychosocial development in contrast to psychosexual development, and I babbled about my own development a little. I was talking really early but reading really late. My development was super lopsided. Which I guess in hindsight doesn't surprise anyone. But at the time, it did. Okay, so let's keep moving, because I know y'all have better things to do than to watch my YouTube videos on double speed. Even though they're designed to be helpful. So I appreciate those of you who are watching. Okay, so some of the current psychoanalytic research. Like most research in this, on psychoanalytic topics, is done by academics. Not typically ones who are practicing psychoanalysts. Because it turns out that to become a psychoanalyst, you have to start your training. You need a terminal degree. So either you have to have an MD or PhD just to start, which is a lot of training. Like post-residency from medical school. So, it's a lot. And often some researchers don't really realize that what they're studying is Freudian. Because topics on this slide, are related to Freudian and neo-Freudian theory, but the much of our research so this is kind of where Freud gets a bad rap, because all the good stuff, all the stuff that we currently do, he doesn't get credit for. He only gets credit for the stuff that nobody else adopted and built upon. So, and that's kind of the final pitch that the book made to me. I was like, okay, I get it. I understand why we need to cover this, because Freud deserves a lot of credit. He doesn't get as much of it as he deserves, which is pretty nuts. I put him in the top 5 public health advances, along with hand washing and antibiotics, and statistics. All right, let's not go down that ramble again. He's important. So some of the current psychoanalytic questions include independent and simultaneous mental processes that can conflict. So implicit versus explicit attitudes falls under this. Just in general, unconscious mental processing. Sorry, there's a bug. Okay. Fun fact that you didn't need to know. And none of the cats are going for it, which means it's a stink bug. Fun facts. Okay. So next we've got compromises among mental processes negotiated outside of consciousness. So conflicting goals. We've also got self-defensive thoughts and self-deception. And kind of the last two here include the influence of the past. So especially how early childhood impacts current functioning. It does a lot. It lays a foundation for attachment theory so strongly, which I've got some videos that I encourage you to that are kind of really illustrative. So check them out. And last, we got the influence of sexual or aggressive wishes on thought, feelings, and behavior. I mean, this is essentially all that advertising taps into is these base needs of sex and violence. Okay, so how do we test psychoanalytic hypotheses? It's possible. Also, these are the default icons. They're glorious. So, the unconscious mind, the unconscious part of the mind can perceive things without the conscious mind's awareness. So and the thinking is it does this to present anxiety. So for example, there's some research studies, the book goes into more detail, where there's recognition of dirty quote words versus neutral words. When flashed upon a screen, participants didn't report recognizing these quote dirty. The book notes include quotes, and so I'm gonna quotes. But So participants didn't reported to not recognize these dirty words, but did recognize other words, which the thinking here, I don't know how much the explanation, but I believe the data, that the unconscious mind realized the dirty words were obscene and blocked them from consciousness. That's the interpretation. I don't know how I feel about the interpretation, but the data is good. Anyway, so next kind of idea that was testable is like most of what the mind does is unconscious. So we can see this with parallel distributed processing, not from a computing standpoint, from a human standpoint, that the mind does many different things at once and only some of them are conscious. So the classic one that I like to bring up is breathing. So you're breathing all the time. You're blinking all the time. But if you're reminded of it, then you start having, you become aware of it, and then you have to, consciously control it. Like now, I'm realizing that I'm blinking and breathing and all those things that I didn't until I mentioned it, had just been kind of automatic. And now, beyond that, you've got, just conscious thoughts and behaviors are, compromises of unconscious processes. That's kind of part of the deal here. Now, last, traits that are associated with having an anal or oral character, according to Freud, are correlated. So it seems that the typing, there's a cloud, so editing's going to be fun. There's going to be, the stereotypical personality type pieces do seem to correlate with actual personality traits. All right, so attachment theory. It's based on the idea of transference. Now, what is transference? I think I mentioned it in an earlier lecture. It's applying old patterns of behavior and emotions to new relationships. It's all about focus. The attachment theory talks about the focus of patterns of relationships with others that are consistently repeated with different partners throughout life. These focus are I just said that. My notes repeat it. And it seems that, at least empirically, that there is consistency in your attachment style across time. So your attachment style in adolescence and high school, or from a baby through adulthood, is pretty stable. There is therapy, there are interventions if you are in an attachment style that you do not want to be in. But there is evidence that these kind of traits are relatively stable. All right, so John Bowlby based this off of evolutionary theory. And he saw it as an attachment as a basis for love. But the idea from an evolutionary standpoint is that humans evolved in a risky environment and feared being alone, which motivated the desire for protection from someone else. So, and that someone else is interested in that person's survival and well-being. And this desire is especially strong in infancy and childhood. Because, well, if you weren't attached to your parent figure, using classic caveman evolutionary psych, you dead. Because somebody else has got to feed you. So it's also just based, so more than just your infant baby stuff, it's based on childhood experiences. So your expectations about attachment are developed for as you so your early relationships really lay the foundation here for what other they're your baseline implicit assumptions for what other people will do and for how you feel and behave about those behaviors. So these childhood lessons are learned from early experiences with adult caregivers. In general, the reliability of attachment figure is the big one. So whether one is the kind of person to whom attachment figures respond in a helpful way leads to secure attachment. So I'm going to talk a bit. Okay. It's very there's my mouse. So, how we kind of evaluated this, Mary Ainsworth developed the strange situation paradigm, where a child is briefly separated from and then reunited with their mother or parent figure. In this, when this was first developed, it was the mother, but like it can be any parent, any parental figure. And what you do is you look at reactions to the mother leaving and returning to determine their attachment type. And I'm going to go through the various attachment types, but the like anxious ambivalent attachment style is like the kid is super vigilant about mom's presence. I'm just going to say mom because it's easier than saying parental figure, but it can be any parent, and becomes upset when she leaves. Now, as an adult, the classic characteristics are attempt to cling to others, which in turn drives them away. Like you become obsessed with your romantic partners, and you frequently worry that partners don't really love them, that they tend to be extremely jealous, and there's a high rate of relationship failure. It's high, and they tend to be highly emotional when under stress. There is therapy if this is your classic style, because it sucks. I have some friends who have this attachment, and it sucks. So there is hope. I mean, if you have this, and you're content with it, great. But it tends to be pretty distressful. Next, we've got avoidant attachment. So this is I'm pretty squarely in the avoidant camp, where you're not distressed when mom leaves, but there are physiological signs of tension and anxiety. So you're stressed, but you don't express it. And then you ignore her when she returns. So as an adult, the book language, I think, is a little harsh, with angry self-reliance. I call it fiercely independent, as well as like a cold, distant attitude toward others. You tend to feel uncomfortable being close to others, and it's difficult for you to trust others completely. You, the stereotypical avoidant attachment style person is uninterested in romantic relationships. They like to work alone. When they're under stress, they tend to withdraw from romantic partners and just anyone who can give them social support. But one way to kind of move to the secure attachment style is to have a romantic partner that is secure. So then that romantic partner essentially demonstrates that, like, oh, they'll be there for you all the time, and that you can trust them. So it's not 100% stable like this. You can kind of move between. So if you have a really rough relationship, that you're typically a really securely attached person, that may like kind of shift you into one of the other kind of attachment buckets. So either maybe to avoidant or anxious. But let's talk about the secure attachment style before I get ahead of myself. So with secure attachment, you the kid, or the illustrations I have are with cats actually, greet mother happily when she returns, and they tend to be easily soothed and actively explore the environment, versus the avoidant style where, like, even if mom attempts to soothe, like, for contact and reassurance, that kid, it's just like, no, you burned me, you dead to me. Not entirely, but like it's kind of that's how I you reinforce that you're just gonna leave, so I'll stop caring, so then it doesn't hurt. Okay, so adult characteristics for secure attachment are positive attitude toward relationships. You find it easy to get close to others and depend on them. You tend to have long, stable relationships, and under stress, you tend to seek out emotional support. Cool. So, in terms of broader attachment theory, these attachment patterns tend to be self-fulfilling. So, they're learned in childhood and tend to be reinforced across young adulthood. Now, you can have, a great childhood experience and then have some, and so on track to be fully secure. But then you have some kind of rough childhood or young adult relationships that they can do some wonders on your attachment style. So it isn't just that whatever it is in childhood is set in stone. Your later relationships can either reinforce that secure attachment or kind of undo all that great work. Now, typically, so I know I've talked about how types are garbage. So let me illustrate how you can kind of think about this. So while most folks do fall pretty cleanly into the 4 categories, the last one is disorganized. And I personally think that the disorganized attachment style is understudied and kind of just gets written off as people who are the product of abuse. You don't have to have, to be in this last quadrant. You don't have to be the product of abuse, but the current research doesn't really focus on it. All right, so we've got avoidance, and anxiety. Let me flip this. Can I erase? All right, let's try this again because my drawing is bad. Okay, let's do purple. All right, so here are our dimensions. I'm changing the colors up just so we can see it better. Okay, so on this axis, we are going to do anxiety. And here we're going to do avoidance. All right, so here's the secure attachment style. Secure. That's totally fine. And you're both low on anxiety and low on avoidance. So high anxiety down here, low up here. And so you can characterize it as 2 traits. Versus if you are not high on anxiety but high on avoidance, it puts you in the avoidance category. And if you are high in anxiety but not super avoidant, that puts you in the anxious category. And lastly, if you are high on both, that puts you in the disorganized. Okay, cool. That's art. Clearly, I'm gonna hopefully edit that so it looks nicer. So, in general, people high on the anxiety and high on avoidance do not pay attention to signs of the emotion of others. So this last little category, there is evidence of unconscious priming, so of attachment figures. So people tend to respond faster to names of people with whom they were emotionally attached after experiencing a threatening subliminal prompt than after a neutral prompt. And there seemed to be no difference for names of people with whom they were not attached, which I think is pretty cool. Now, in terms of doctrine of opposites, in general, being too anxious or too avoidant, not so great. From a relationship stability standpoint. The ideal is closer to the middle, which is where secure is on this lovely piece of art. Okay, I'm going to clear the ink on this slide so we can actually read it. Alright, now to illustrate, I've linked 2 YouTube videos. One is by Wired. This study came out about a week before the last time pretty close to when I taught this earlier, and so please check it out. I'm not going to play it here, but I'm going to it is helpful to illustrate the paradigm, because these attachment styles apply to other animals. If you are curious, Tukey has a pretty secure attachment style, a little on the anxious side, a smidge. He was feral, so I don't know, like in some undergrads found him in a sewer pipe when he was young, so I get it. Archie seems to be pretty secure, maybe a little anxious, and Annie, who you never see, take a wild guess. Avoidant. She's so avoidant. That's why you never see her. She avoids. Now, Archie and Annie were about 6 months old when I got them, so from the anecdotal evidence that I've gathered, even though they lived behind the freshman dorms, Mama Cat disappeared one day. So, and they fended for themselves. They're doing pretty well, considering. But yeah, so these attachment styles apply elsewhere. Oh, no, don't autoplay.
The internet?
No! Shit. Let's try this again. Okay. Oops. Oh, and guess what? We have to sync that. Oops. Alright, so fun fact, it autoplays even when you're in Zentra mode. Okay, so next time, we're going to talk about psychoanalysis and perspective. And yeah, okay. So that was a thing. Oops. Sometimes these recordings don't go as planned. I'm not going to tap back and re-record because I just want to get these done, and I imagine you do too. Awesome. Okay, so we talked about last time. We talked about like attachment and like modern Freud. Know those things. Attachment style, very important. In case that was unclear, it'd be a really good thing to know. Hopefully, this is subtle enough. All right.